Good morning. Another episode of Hitting Humans. Okay, I want to establish something. I am not trying to use this video series as a way of bragging about exploits, because if you've watched some of the videos, I talk about how when I was younger and I, hit people, had to hit people, and some of the blows were not effective. They didn't do what I wanted them to do. And it's a combination of I was young, I was very poorly trained, I was self-taught in a few things, and I had inexperience in not just fighting, but I didn't have a lot of sparring partners. So there are techniques that I learned and used for the first time in a situation where someone was trying to hurt me. So, but I also know that there are, martial artists out there that have trained for 20, 30 or more years that maybe haven't been in a fight, or if they have been in a fight, maybe they just did some boxing or something, or they did sports sparring techniques. But I'm doing this because there are techniques within your art, your traditional or neo-traditional arts, and they work, and I know because I worked them, right? So let's talk about the white crane wingtip, a sort of block that can also be a strike, all right? And this is something, it exists in Goju Ryu. It kind of looks like this. It's called kakeuke, but we just called it white crane hand or white crane wingtip. And I got heavily into it in not Goju Ryu, but Go Cho Kyun, Five Ancestor Fist, which is a style I have a black sash in from Master Bonifacio Lim. But let me get a little bit into this, right? Goju Ryu and Go Cho Kyun are definitely 1000% related. They both have Sanchin. They have versions of Sanchin, and they both have a version of Tensho, and many of the so-called blocks and maneuvers are the same. They use that Sanchin stance, that pigeon-toed sort of stance. They do deep breathing, dynamic tension. Although Gocho Kyun, in my opinion, is far more complicated and sophisticated than Goju Ryu. First of all, it has far more forms. It has far more weapons. It has all of its empty hand forms come in two flavors. One is the Qian version, and which is sort of for so-called internal development. They're for exercise, like Sanchin, Tensho, and Goju Ryu. There are many of those, much more than in Goju Ryu. Goju Ryu has Sanchin and Tensho. The fighting forms, the Chen forms, almost all can be converted into two-man forms, or maybe there are two-man forms for every of them, but not everybody knows them. The partner variation, and they double as forearm conditioning. What I think in Goju Ryu is called Kotu Kitai, right? So they're very interrelated. Goju Ryu, because it's kind of a more modern system, has a lot more emphasis on kicking, in my opinion, and they've imported side thrust kicks and roundhouse kicks and hook kicks and even spinning kicks. I don't think you can go to a Goju Ryu dojo anywhere where if someone is young enough to do those longer range kicks and some jump kicks that they're not doing it. And there is a jump kick in Super Inpei, right? And in Go Cho Kyun, Five Ancestor Fist, they do have some jump kicks and things. And they also have a long fist. They have long fist forms. They have monkey forms. They have, it's a deep system, far more complicated, just in terms of sheer amount of material and varieties of material than Goju Ryu. But that white crane hand is part of it. So I used it once when I was fairly new here. I came here in 2011. This might have been 2012 or 2013. I'm not completely sure. There was a place downtown called The Bridge, which during the day was a music academy and at night was a bar. and I got a job bouncing in that bar. I, just walking around town when I was new. So this must have been around 2011, 2012. And I saw the Music Academy, and then I saw that there was a bar attached to it, and I'm like, I need a job. So I walked in there and I said, hey, can I talk to a manager? And this guy, Wes, came out, and I talked to him, and I said, hey, I'm a, martial artist. I have experience bouncing, and I'd like to know if you needed one. And he said, all right, give me, I did a demonstration of where I had him point his fingers in a spear hand and push it as deep in my solar plexus as possible. Then I, boom, contracted my muscles and popped his hand out of my solar plexus by contracting my abs, which seemed, I don't know if some people are impressed by that, because I'm like, I can take a hit. I wanted to let people know I know how to take a hit. And I, gave him my email and phone number, and he sent me an email, and I sent him a few videos from YouTube of me doing some things when my YouTube channel was very rudimentary. And he said, yeah, sure, I'll try it out. And I wound up working there for about a year. And he had a buddy named Steve, big, tall guy, kind of with a twang, and skinny. A lot of people in this town are much taller than me, and much taller than I'm used to. It's the Midwest. You got a lot of people of Germanic or, Nordic background. And he also used to come in, hey, good looking, how you doing? Kind of like that, friendly guy. I like the guy. So one day he comes in, and he is drunk. He's going to the bar drunk. And I think he worked at a restaurant. I don't know what his job was there. And there was a lady with him. And she wasn't drunk. And he took her to the club. And I guess he was like, he wanted to show her how awesome the club was. And as I'm checking IDs, I have the band I'm going to put on your wrist. And he's like, hey, little buddy, how you doing? And he's trying to hug me. Let's wrestle. And I'm like, Steve, don't do that. Steve, come on, Steve. And it actually got fairly serious, right? And I realized maybe he wanted to show how studly he was to his date about, look, I can push this little tiny bouncer around. I'm Steve. And again, I like the guy. I don't want to hurt him. So hitting him was out of the question. And he grabbed me, right? And it was his right hand kind of went across my left shoulder and across my body. And his right hand had me this way. And his left hand, I think, was trying to clutch my wrist. Maybe he had some wrestling background. And I was like, I felt, instinctively I had to do something. And I pivoted around, and I had him set up for a seiyunage, a shoulder throw. And I had him lifted, and I paused, and I was like, ugh. And I noticed, we're outside on the patio. It's a concrete floor. And I was like, then I started walking around with him, shaking my butt. I'm like, hey, Steve, let's go for a ride, And he's like, put me down. Which is funny because his legs were so long. I think he could have just, put his legs down or something. But he was very drunk. And I let him go. And he was mad. And he was kind of stumbling around trying to regain his footing. And he had oriented himself towards me with his left side forward, and he was kind of sideways. So I stepped in with my right foot and hooked behind that right foot, but it was like horse stance to horse stance almost, And I brought my knee forward like I'd been taught in Tai Chi to check his knee, and I hip checked him. I took my hip and bumped into him, right? And he was stumbling all around. And then what I did was I ran over to his date, and I was like, for some reason I was like, I still have to put the wristband on her, and she's like, I hope you're not gonna take me for a ride like that. I'm like, no, ma'am. And then Steve circled back around, and this time he was in front of me. He's like, I'm gonna kill you, and his hands came out towards me, And before I knew what happened, I was in the left foot forward San Chin stance, and I had this part of my wrist. I had controlled his forearms, and I slid into his elbow joint, and now I had him by the elbow joint. And I'm like, Steve, you're not going to kill me. Just relax, man. It's no big deal. I'm going to fucking kill you. I'm going to kill you. And so there's a technique in Go Cho where it's basically an arm drag, where you go over that elbow, loop it around. Now I've got the back of the elbow, and I do a palm maneuver, and I can catch this elbow, right? But because he was drunk, whenever you turn a drunk person, they really turn, they really rotate. He turned to where his entire back was facing me, and so my hands came out, and I got from behind. I had one elbow, and I pinched him in a little bit against his side, almost like, trying to do a lateral raise. And he's screaming about, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to fuck you up. And I'm like, Steve, no, you're not. Steve, no, you're not. Steve, relax. And I kind of walked him towards the entrance of the bar. And at the entrance of the bar, remember, it was an open patio. Wesley, Steve's friend, and, some of his kind of closer associates, were there having drinks. And I looked at him like, Steve, look at your friends. Look at your friends. Look at Wesley. Look at your friends. And he's looking at him, and he kind of quieted down. I'm like, look, man, you're embarrassing yourself in front of your friends. Steve got real quiet. And I looked at Wes and his buddy. I'm like, will someone please take him from me before I have to hurt him? And they came over there. Hey, Steve, right. They took him inside, and his date went inside, and everybody on the patio was just looking at me, And they're like, what the hell was that? And I went back, and I kind of felt bad. I didn't want to make him look bad. I like Steve. He's normally a funny guy. He's always like, you're too damn good looking. Hey, good looking. I'm like, is he gay? But he's not gay. That's just kind of the way he talks. And a little bit later, Wes comes out, and he was neither smiling nor frowning. I'm like, man, I hope this didn't create trouble for me. He goes, thanks for not hurting my friend. I'm like, okay. And then he went back inside. A little bit later, Steve comes out, and he's like real apologetic. I'm so stupid, I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's okay, Steve. I'm stupid, I'm an idiot. I'm like, no, you're not, Steve. Hey, you had little bit of drink. No, man, I'm just so stupid. I'm like, Steve, everybody gets drunk. Everybody's made a fool of themselves once. It's no big deal. I forgive you. Are we cool? I'm giving him a hug and everything, and he goes back inside. And then later in the night, when we're kind of winding down, he walks out, and he goes to his car, and his date kind of lingers there, and she comes over, and she kisses me on the cheek, and, I guess she was glad that I didn't hurt him, and I'm like, just kind of nodded my head. I'm like, well, I guess I did the right thing, but I still didn't get the girl. He's going home with the girl at the end of the night. But yeah, that was my one incident with both San Chin stance and White Crane wingtip hands. They're very useful, and I think in Goju Ryu you have drills, kakeuke drills, kind of like their version of push hands and sticky hands. And we didn't do that too much in Go Cho, but because I have training in sticky hands and push hands from Tai Chi, I would often incorporate some of this into that with my friends. So, I was heavier than Steve. He's very tall and thin, but he was taller and maybe a little younger, drunk, had a big reach advantage. But, what you'll find is that really tall people sometimes don't know how to use that reach advantage. And if they're angry, their impulse is to get in very close. So as a short person, that actually is something you can take advantage of. If I wanted to, really hurt Steve. I think having controlled that center line, I could have hit him in the face, solar plexus, throat, groin, all the very classical Fukinese type blows. All right. I didn't, because I knew he didn't really want to hurt me, and I could feel, just by making contact with him that he wasn't very trained and wasn't very strong. But that was a real world usage that I did, and I just want to pass that on. That technique does have some utility in infighting. All right. Oh, for instance, you Gracie Jiu-Jitsu people, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people, you could incorporate some of this into your grip fighting, and you could make it hard for someone to establish a grip to pull guard on you. I think that's something I did often in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but that's training. This was a real-life incident. Have a good day.